I'm getting it done. I'm doing what I do, man. Sometimes I'll be like, man, I'm tired.
Actor T.K. Carter, known for his roles in the 1980s horror classic The Thing and TV's Punky Brewster, has passed away.
Everyone thinks T.K. Carter's life in Hollywood was glamorous, but behind the fame, he endured struggles most could never comprehend. From his earlier days to his introduction into Hollywood, to his rise to stardom, and then his wife's death, it felt like all was against him. But still, he kept his feelings in a bottle and kept on moving. Now the questions arise. What did Hollywood do to him? Why did he stay silent until it was too late? Join us as we discuss the true events that happened in the life of icon T.K. Carter. The tragic discovery. Actor T.K. Carter, who was known for his roles in the 1980s horror classic The Thing and TV's Punky Brewster, has passed away.
Bullshit, Warner. 5 minutes is enough to put a man over down here.
Damn straight.
I mean, look at Punk.
This information was passed on the 9th of January, 2026, after deputies pushed through his apartment door in Duarte, California. They came in as a result of a request from his family to conduct a welfare check. Upon arriving, they found Thomas Kent Carter unresponsive on the floor, a 69-year-old man, dead and alone. There was no evidence of foul play or a tussle in the scene. Nothing pointed to anything. There were also no suspected individuals. This was as quiet a death as possible. After the autopsy, it was discovered that he died from systolic heart failure. According to a death certificate released by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, several factors contributed to his passing. He faced a condition in which the heart's left ventricle was too weak to pump blood efficiently. This meant he suffered severe irregular heartbeats before the flow ceased altogether. Before this event, his brother, Harold Carter, had already expressed concerns about Carter's health problems, noting that he had been battling diabetes and other cardiac issues in the months leading up to his death. The law enforcement source's press release stated that the family requested a welfare check on Carter only after they had not heard from him for several days. They also informed the police that he reported having high blood pressure days prior. Harold also wrote down on his police report that TK had suffered an apparent head injury before he was found, and this was likely the reason his heart gave out. These statements have been supported and cleared by the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner. On the path of fame, sometimes the cruelest part isn't about losing it. Sometimes it's about how quiet the room gets when you eventually do. And fame never really lasts. In a system like Hollywood's, every star gets a bright moment and a dull one. Some stars just remain in the middle for large parts of their careers. Carter's light graph took more of a down, then up, then down again route, the all-too-popular grassroots trope. And yes, everybody knew his name at one point. Before his resume went quiet, there was a whole lot of noise. In the mid-70s, there was word about an audition for a small role that was meant to be held in a club somewhere in Southern California. It was the kind of reserved spot where only legends passed through and where only extra special local kids got cameos. Cameos that lasted only a mere 5 minutes to prove they belonged. This was where Thomas Kent Carter first stepped up. Here he was, barely a teenager, and was full of all sorts of nerves coupled with hunger. And that was exactly when the music kicked in. In the loud noise playing over this audition, he didn't just perform James Brown. He absolutely embodied the make and break of the character. With mouths opened, the crowd roared like crazy because they knew this kid wasn't here to play. He was already working like his life depended on it. And that was exactly how his early career moved. Climbing the ladders of Hollywood. Thomas Kent Carter was born in New York City and grew up in the San Gabriel Valley area of Southern California. It was especially tough when growing up, because at the time, Black families were still carving out space in the California suburbs. He spent his early years facing things like prejudice and discrimination against his color. But luckily, when he finally decided to step into his creativity, it was at a time when it was becoming more acceptable for Black voices to be heard. Before his TV roles, Carter was extremely talented and worked odd jobs at places like Disneyland and pubs. There, he worked as a stand-up comedian and as an opening act for major names. These names included James Brown, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Kool and the Gang. Most would describe these as just gigs, but it was far from it. These weren't opportunities available to all. His talent and work ethic led to these high-profile openings. T.K. Carter's rise through these gigs all the way up to fame was fueled by fearless comedic energy. This originality and soul saw him transition from a child stand-up comic to a versatile Hollywood character actor. He began performing at these stand-up comedy routines at the age of 12, working in clubs that were typically reserved for adults. Carter finally established himself as a professional stand-up performer at legendary venues like the Comedy Store and the Improvisation Cafe in Los Angeles. Carter's educational background was rooted in the Southern California communities where he spent his youth. He attended Duarte High School in Duarte, California, the same city where he later resided. During his time in high school, he was a standout track champion, demonstrating early discipline and physical talent. Despite this, he still managed to maintain his theatrical roots. His love for performance blossomed on the high school stage. During this period, he appeared in various theater productions, including a notable turn in Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. After graduating from high school, Carter attended Citrus Junior College, located in Azusa, California. He continued to refine his craft by studying acting at the Van Mar Academy of Motion Picture and Television Acting for over 40 years. High school brought a production of The Odd Couple that lit something deeper in his heart. It wasn't just the laughs, but there was something else entirely calling to him in this role. Perhaps this was where he truly fell in love with it. Perhaps this was where he fell in love with the way you could hold a room with the timing and tone of acting. So he hustled, and a few happenings later, he opened for Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight, and Luther Vandross when the world was still learning their names. During this time, he continued working in the comedy circuit and built his resume. This was the stage in which he learned that being good wasn't enough. One had to be ready every single night without knowing who was watching. Perhaps the most astonishing thing was the time he did this. It was at a time when the grind was different. There were no phones and internet to create random viral moments or algorithm boosts. It was just him, the stages, and the crowds with the slow burn of building a name. But here's the thing about being the opener. It is the first appearance, but it isn't really at the forefront of anything memory-related. Carter would warm the room, earn the first few rounds of applause, receive a little thumbs up and respect, and then when it's all said and done, the headliner gets around 99% of the love. Carter knew that rhythm well. He knew that whatever he was doing at the moment was just a stopgap to what was really to come. He didn't want to leave folks wanting more and walk off stage before the real applause came. It was time for him to aim higher. Eventually, in accordance with his wishes, the real camera test came in 1977, and he made his television sitcom debut. It was a pivotal year that launched his transition from a stand-up comedian into a recognizable TV actor. Carter made his first major sitcom appearance on Good Times as Head, a member of J.J. Evans's friend group known as the Awesome Foursome. He is remembered for the Awesome Foursome chant he helped create for the episode. He then appeared in the television movie Billy, Portrait of a Street Kid in the same year, and had a guest role on The Waltons. This work was steady and perfect for him at the time. Income came in and the checks were cleared, but these weren't the roles that changed lives. He didn't want to remain at this level. He wanted to climb ladders. He wanted more. Breakthrough through the thing. And sometimes, in Hollywood, maybe that's all one needs. Want, hope, and tunnel vision. 5 years after this declaration of want and tireless work ethic, he was noticed by those in the higher-ups and finally got a call for a breakthrough role. John Carpenter called in 1982. The director, fresh off just making Halloween and Escape from New York, was trying to assemble a cast for a project meant to bring cold, claustrophobic, and paranoid vibes.
You could call him Mr. Halloween. John Carpenter directs movies that strike fear into the hearts of millions.
A sci-fi horror set in Antarctica, where trust would die faster than bodies froze. T.K. Carter got the call and got cast as Knowles, an outpost chef in the U.S. Outpost 31. A man who famously skates through the Antarctic base while blasting Stevie Wonder's Superstition on his boombox as aliens tear through his crew one by one. It is considered one of the most memorable performances in John Carpenter's 1982 horror masterpiece. At just 26 years old, Carter was one of the youngest members of the cast and had no doubt cemented his name and voice. Key moments of this character include a memorable moment where he delivered one of the film's most famous lines. maybe were at war with Norway, and played a pivotal role in the plot when he abandoned MacReady, a character played by Kurt Russell, after finding his shredded clothes, sparking the team's ultimate paranoia. In this film, Knowles is the only character whose death is never shown on screen. He simply wanders into the darkness to investigate a noise and never returns. Apparently, his character is also loved by movie critics and originalists, as he once appears in a deleted scene. Original storyboards and a partially filmed sequence showed Knowles being assaulted by the Blair Thing. In this sequence, he appears out of a crack in the floor and begs for help before finally being consumed by the Blair Thing. Carpenter later cut the scene because the practical effects didn't meet his standards and were not time and cost-effective to adjust. Like his story, this movie's success wasn't always linear. It faced failure initially upon its release in 1982. Upon its release, The Thing was a critical and commercial flop. It opened the same summer as the much friendlier E.T. and was trashed by critics like Roger Ebert, who called it a barf bag movie. Then eventually, over the decades, it became reappraised as one of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever made, celebrated for its groundbreaking practical effects by Rob Bottin and its masterclass in the portrayal of psychological paranoia. Following Carter's death in January, his The Thing castmates shared fond memories of his time on set. Thomas G. Waits, who played Windows, remembered Carter as the life of the set, recalling how he made them laugh a lot during the shoot, and even in the harsh conditions of the Alaskan glacier. Richard Masur, who starred as Clark, mentioned that Carter was like a kid in a candy store who treated the entire production like a dream come true. Larry Franco, who produced the entire movie, highlighted Carter's infectious energy and his genuine love for his character's roller skates. Keith David, who played Childs, described Carter as his friend and brother, noting how they bonded as the two youngest actors on set during what was also David's first feature film. He mentioned how composed he was in contrast to his initial assessment of Carter. The Thing opened that summer to $19.6 million. It was decent, but still not blockbuster level. Critics immediately labeled Carpenter's vision as bleak and intended to undo what he had built. But luckily, the movie didn't die. VHS tapes continued circulating. Late-night cable channels played it on loop, and somewhere along the line it picked up.
The big ending sequence that you see in the Great Arcade took 5 days to shoot. Now, in a normal film, we would have spent months on it.
And in that same place, Knowles became iconic. Decades later, horror fans still quote him. They still send gifs of his roller skating entrance, and they still remember the chef who brought light to the darkest corners of that frozen nightmare. He became widely known to audiences for his role in The Thing, and for a long career that included memorable appearances in movies and TV throughout the 1980s and beyond. In this career, he went on to show much more. A truly blissful tour of Hollywood. Carter had given them a character they'd never forget. After his breakout in The Thing, Carter built a career defined by an incredible ability to pivot between high-energy comedy, beloved children's television, and gritty, award-winning drama. Many might have suggested that he just continue the same path, but with his ambition, talent, and especially after the exposure he got from The Thing, he knew this tour was needed. Apart from all that, non-lead roles in cult classics did not pay like lead roles in blockbusters, and niche fame didn't open doors. At the end of the day, this was still a job, and he needed to make money in order to ensure his longevity. Offers started coming in immediately after The Thing's release in 1983. ABC decided to give Carter a shot at a lead role in Just Our Luck, a sitcom where he went on to play Shabu, a genie trying to navigate modern LA. For 11 episodes, Carter carried this network show and brought his warmth, humor, and tone to primetime. In this role, he proved he could anchor a series, and then, just like that, the network pulled the plug and canceled it before the season even finished. The show got canceled due to a combination of poor viewership and significant public controversies. Due to poor planning, ABC scheduled the show on Tuesday nights directly against NBC's massive hit, The A-Team. It failed to capture its target 18 to 49 age demographic and was consistently beaten in ratings. Then, out of panic, they launched a shabby creative marketing team overhaul. But it was all to no avail, as critics had already given up on the show. They condemned it and called it a poor imitation of I Dream of Jeannie. Shortly after this cancellation, T.K. Carter moved on to his recurring role as Mike Fulton on Punky Brewster in 1985. This was NBC's hit about a spirited orphan navigating foster care with Carter, meant to appear as Punky's teacher. Carter's time on Punky Brewster marked a significant shift in his career, transitioning from his more edgy film and comedy work to a heartfelt role as a mentor in a family-oriented sitcom. The character was originally intended to lead his own spin-off series titled Fenster Hall, focusing on his work as a counselor at the orphanage. But when the network passed on the spin-off, producers brought Carter back as a regular teacher for the second season. Even though he wasn't the lead here, he was still central to several very special episodes, including one where he helped Punky process the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster by bringing in real-life astronaut Buzz Aldrin to visit. That same year, TK took a hard left into action, playing Dave Prince in Runaway Train, an Oscar-nominated thriller with Jon Voight. In the film, Dave Prince was a railroad dispatch associate, and unlike the gritty convicts on the train, his character was part of the ground control team at the railroad's central office, working alongside Frank Barstow, played by Kyle T. Hefner, and Eddie McDonald, played by Kenneth McMillan. As the train hurtled uncontrollably through the Alaskan wilderness, Carter's character was central to the frantic efforts to stop the out-of-control monolith before it could collide with a chemical plant. This role required a more buttoned-up performance compared to his usual comedic or street-smart characters. After all, it was focusing on the technical and emotional stress of an unfolding disaster. The film featured a powerhouse ensemble and was based on an original screenplay by the legendary Akira Kurosawa. One of the only and main issues of this set lay with Carter's castmates. While Carter was in the relatively stable dispatch office scenes, the production itself was reportedly troubled by rampant cocaine abuse among some crew members. It was so bad that Danny Trejo had to be brought in on set as a drug abuse counselor.
I remember this director once said, "Danny, kick in this door and intimidate." I kicked in the door and
T.K. Carter could do it all. In the 1980s, he starred in some sitcom stardom and cult classics. He became a household name through several of these key television roles. He played Milo Williams, the maintenance supervisor in Good Morning, Miss Bliss for 2 years from 1988 to 1989. This show later evolved into Saved by the Bell. He also appeared in some film highlights. He did this in the action thriller Runaway Train in 1985.
I don't see any runaway.
If you were close enough to see her, you'd be dead. Get it?
And also starred in the cult comedy He's My Girl in 1987. In He's My Girl, he famously played a man who disguises himself as a woman to accompany his friend to Hollywood. In the 1990s, he did some voice acting and some more sitcoms. Here, in voice acting, his distinct, energetic voice became a staple of Saturday morning cartoons. He voiced Monstar Naught in the original Space Jam in 1996 and Anthony Julian in the 80s hit, Gem. He also provided voices for the Transformers and Turbo Teen. Alongside this, he became a frequent guest on 90s hits, including recurring roles on The Sinbad Show as Clarence Hull and The Steve Harvey Show as T-Bone. In the 2000s, he faced a dramatic turning point. In the year 2000, Carter stunned critics by moving completely away from his usual hip comedic persona for a devastating dramatic performance. In The Corner by HBO, he played Gary McCullough, a former businessman struggling with heroin addiction in Baltimore. Critics hailed the performance as one of the best in television history, with the Boston Globe noting he perfectly captured the gentleness and passivity of addiction. This series served as a direct precursor to The Wire. After this, he continued to work in high-profile projects. In 2003, he portrayed Bill Cosby in the film Badass and appeared in Tony Scott's Domino 2 years later in 2005. And that was all about After the Thing for T.K. Carter. He was everywhere. Turn on the TV and there he was, a familiar face lighting up the screen, bringing light to every room he entered, and sometimes he brought the necessary sadness. But being everywhere didn't exactly mean the same as indispensable, and a familiar face didn't necessarily mean an untouchable star. The regression of a star. While stars like Eddie Murphy were selling out arenas and people like Denzel were climbing towards industry-leading man status, Carter was still grinding. He was still going from paycheck to paycheck and from movie to movie with the simple man's aim of paying bills. The fade on his person happened slowly, as he was aging. It was so gruesome that almost an entire era passed without the appearance of a single headline to mark the moment. It was so bad because the 90s rolled by with so many shows that were his style. It had Fresh Prince, Martin, Living Single, Family Matters, and the like. They all came in and went by. Black shows were finally claiming primetime real estate, and it was no longer hard for black actors like him to get into roles, but the leads went to younger faces. The producers requested handsome, athletic men to be the faces of their franchises.
Then taking that what's happening over here and putting it into my performance also too.
There was now only space for faces and names that could carry a network's fandom on their muscular shoulders. Despite this, TK Carter kept working regardless. He then resorted to taking on cameo roles, guest spots, and appearances instead of spots that required recurring arcs or heavy contracts. Finally, in 1993, what looked like a breakthrough came in, The Sinbad Show, where he played Clarence Hull for 24 episodes, a solid supporting role in a show that had heart and momentum. It should have been another launch pad, but the show got canceled. But in no way was this the highlight of his career. He was still a legendary figure in Hollywood. Before his death, he had already touched many tiers of stardom. The legacy and fall of a star. In Gen Z terms, he was him. No one could comfortably chat to this icon in terms of achievements and mileage. The 2000s brought about Him in the Corner on HBO. It showed 6 episodes of Simon and Ed Burns dissecting systemic collapse. And TK Carter? He disappeared into the Gary McCullough character with a performance that stunned critics. After the movie, reviews came in like fire. In the next year, in 2001, he finally got the validation which he deserved, a Black Reel Award for Best Actor, the kind of hardware that changed conversations and shut people up. The roles that came after The Corner weren't leads. They included guest spots on Family Matters and The Steve Harvey Show. In 2023, he finally started offering his final set of roles. In this year, he starred as Cliff on Dave, Lil Dicky's FX comedy, and Pike on The Company You Keep. In August 2025, he sat down for an interview on the Live from the Green Room podcast and talked about The Corner, faith, and how God took him to places he couldn't take himself.
Who was always a serious actor too, now he gets the opportunity to go to another level. And this is where I say,
he said his voice carried that same belief throughout his career and that he is a living testimony. He also talked about understanding life's lessons, the understanding that the journey was the point even when the industry didn't reward it the way you hoped. In this interview, he spoke extensively and emotionally about his late wife, Sandra, and the significant impact her illness had on his life and career. Carter revealed that he had lost Sandra to cancer in 2024.
Yeah, I just lost my wife to cancer and was with her for 15 years.
He shared that Sandra had battled this disease for 8 years before she eventually gave in. He also described the immense difficulty of balancing his creative work while trying to be a supportive husband. He also noted that for those 8 years, he had to remember his lines and stay focused on set while his wife was fighting for her life. He admitted that her diagnosis and the subsequent years of caregiving somewhat turned his life upside down and nearly ended his career as he prioritized his family over Hollywood. Friends and family members, including his brother Harold, have admitted to this and now remember him as a dedicated caregiver who took great care of Sandra throughout her illness. At the time of his own passing, he was survived by his mother and his children. During his time on The Steve Harvey Show as T-Bone, the show won 4 consecutive NAACP Image Awards for Outstanding Comedy Series. When he was on Punky Brewster, the series became a multi-time Emmy nominee for Outstanding Children's Program. Carter was also a member of the Television Academy and was frequently invited in as a presenter for their major events, such as the Soul Train Music Awards. Even though he didn't win 100 awards, he was him, and may his soul rest in peace. Why do you think Carter never complained despite facing all those difficulties in his career? And what do you think about Hollywood's harsh policy against old performers? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.